Gives me great pleasure this morning to welcome Don Hutson as our opening keynote speaker. A fine gentleman. He's written an incredible book. He has an illustrious career. I'm going to let him do the talking, but I'd like a warm EO Big Texas roundup welcome for Don.
Hey, a little less conversation, a little more action, please. All this aggravation ain't satisfaction.
All right. Well, great to be with EO Texas for your roundup. I'm delighted to have this opportunity. Anytime I have the privilege of spending some time with talented entrepreneurs, I'm doing something I very much like to do. And Sean, I appreciate the simplicity of that very nice introduction. Some people feel compelled to go on and on. You never know what kind of introduction you're going to get. So thank you for just getting me up here to get things going. I did have a guy who introduced me one time. The guy was scared to death, shaking, sweating, knowing he was going to have to be at that microphone. He had what we refer to in speaking as microphobia, where you get close to one of these and you kind of freak out. He finally made his way up to the lectern. He shook a little more and sweat a little more. He looked out over the crowd of a few hundred, and all he could say was, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to bore you with a long speech. I'll just give you Don Hutson, who will. And with that, I was on, right? So you never know what to expect. Well, let me take a quick survey. How many of you have either heard me before or never heard me? Okay, I understand the late night party was late last night, so that is a test, and you're doing pretty good so far. Well, in addition to a sharing of ideas this morning, we're also going to have a little fun. If that's okay with everybody, say yes. Great. Some of you look like you need to have a little fun. A number of you look like you've already had too much. In fact, where'd Chris McKee go? Where are you, Chris? There's Chris back there. I saw Chris earlier. Chris, you better close your eyes before you bleed to death. You know that? By the way, I want to tell everybody at the front tables, you got the best seat in the house right here. I never, ever pick on anybody right up front. To the contrary, I appreciate you being up front. That's why I've got good moral support at these front tables that are just about full. That's great. I usually find somebody to pick on sitting back there about where Chris is. And you are my man this morning, Chris. Don't go anywhere. All right, don't go anywhere. I'm going to need you later, but I'll go ahead and thank you in advance for being my volunteer, okay? So we'll have a little fun today. We'll also talk about some pretty serious issues. What an incredible opportunity for you to experience past President George Bush. You've heard about the power of purpose. You've had great opportunities to experience camaraderie and try to be the best you can be and working together. And I really have great admiration for what EO is really all about. It does so much good. And I applaud you for your enthusiastic participation in the EO organization and for being at this meeting here today. So you're up early on a Saturday morning. Boy, this speaker better be good to get me up this early after last night, right? Well, I want you to know that my goal today is I want to be valuable to you. I want to give you some takeaways that can be meaningful for you. And in my time this morning, my goal is I want to give you some things that will make you think and make you say, you know what, I'm glad I heard that. I can use that. So let's get busy with it. Part number one of my program today deals with what I call having visions for change and progress. If we're going to grow, and you're about growth, you're about success, or you never would have joined EO in the first place, and I applaud you for that. We want to think about what we can do to take us from where we are to where we truly want to be. And it had to start back there somewhere in your past. You were inspired to bite the bullet and to become an entrepreneur. And it involves risk, and it involves courage, and it involves tenacity, and it involves skills, and they're multifaceted skill sets we got to possess to pull it off, as you know. You know, I got an early and rather tenuous start. Of course, I had some part-time jobs when I was a kid, but I graduated from the University of Memphis with a major in sales. That's kind of cool because it was the only sales major in America at that time. Now, I'm not trying to impress you that I'm a college graduate. In fact, I believe in authenticity and full disclosure. So I'll be honest with you this morning. I did not graduate in the top half of my class. I did graduate in the half that made the top half possible. May I be very frank with you? Say yes. Okay. My first 2 years of college, I almost flunked out a couple of times. And my dad wasn't very happy about it. But I was busy. I had parties to go to, and I did have 2 part-time jobs. and I only slept 3 or 4 hours a night, and I was taking 18 hours, and I had overcommitted myself, and I handled it very poorly as an immature 18, 19-year-old might do. But at the end of 2 years of college and almost flunking out, my dad got me off to the side one day, and he said, "Don," I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "How do you feel about your first 2 years of college?" I said, "Well, it really hasn't gone very well, Dad." He said, "Well, let me ask you a real blunt question, son." He said, "Are you going to be a winner or are you going to be a loser?" That one question was the best and shortest motivational seminar I've ever attended. I said, "Dad, I'm going to be a winner." He said, "Well, when are you going to get started, boy?" I said, "How about first thing in the morning?" He said, "Sounds good to me." My last 2 years of college, I made almost straight A's. I did graduate in 4 years, but it was about this concept of having goals and visions and a purpose I didn't previously have. You see, everything's about timing, isn't it? I made a commitment, and it was a commitment to get serious about what I was doing, and I began to study more, party less. And I did pretty good my last 2 years of college. I tell you that story because it was a learning experience for me. Dr. Morris Massey said many years ago, few people ever change any behavior until and unless they have a meaningful emotional experience. And that's what I had in my conversation with my dad that day, a meaningful emotional experience. So I think one of our great challenges is we got to back off and take a look at the big picture and think about the fact if we're going to be willing to make some changes and to do better than ever before, we've got to have an open mind. We've got to periodically wipe the slate clean and look for new ideas and the things that will help to propel us to the next level. Now, when we think about some of these challenges and how we're going to address them, I'd like to suggest to you we've got to have a high change quotient. Right here in Dallas, there's a resident for many years by the name of Jim Rohn, fellow professional speaker. How many of you ever heard Jim Rohn? Boy, he was one of the really fine ones, and I always enjoyed listening to him, and I gained much from it. He passed away in December, regrettably. But about 1985, I was on a program in San Francisco with Jim Rohn. We had a big rally there with a couple of thousand people, and he said something that day. It was the first time I'd ever heard it. Now, since we've heard the line a lot because it's a good line, and good lines tend to get out there in the marketplace. When's the last time you heard somebody say, "If you keep on doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep on getting what you've been getting"? You ever heard that? First time I heard it was Jim Rohn. I think he was the originator of the thought. I wrote it down that day. I quoted him a couple of hundred times. If you keep on doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep on getting what you've been getting. Now, I was using that thought line in a national sales meeting to a company with 1,000 people in the audience about a year and a half ago, and I'm right in the middle of quoting Jim Rohn when all of a sudden, like a lightning bolt from the sky, it occurred to me. That's not true anymore. Keep on doing what you've been doing and you'll keep on getting what you've been getting is based on the premise that we are a part of a static, never-changing marketplace. How many of you would agree that we are not a part of a static, never-changing marketplace? We are a part of a dynamic, ever-changing marketplace. And you've done some great things or you wouldn't have earned the right to be in this room this morning and you wouldn't be a successful entrepreneur, but I would challenge you to question, to tweak, to fine-tune every process you have in place and think about how you can make it a little bit better, because if you keep on doing what you've been doing, you're going to get less than you ever did. And the reason is that the bar of excellence is going up on us every single day in every single way. The world is changing and it's changing fast. The marketplace is changing and it's changing fast. So if we keep on doing what we've been doing, we're going to get less in return than we used to get. By the way, who is raising the bar? This means participate. Who's raising the bar on us? Anybody? Competition. Customers. Ourselves. Let's hope we are. Let's hope we're raising the bar on all our people in our companies. And yeah, always thinking about how we can do it a little bit better. My favorite Jack Welch quote is, "If it's changing faster on the outside than it is inside your company, your days are numbered." I think we need to embrace change and get excited about it. And when we think about the dynamics of change, we think about our people. How many of you got some people who don't like change very much? Let me rephrase the question. How many of you got some people who want to arrive without having made the trip? Yeah. You know, most people call those in my business a motivational speaker. I don't have a big problem with the term, but it's not generally how I describe myself. If I meet someone at a social event or a cocktail party and they say, "What do you do?" I say, "Well, I'm a professional speaker on selling value, entrepreneurship, and negotiations, and I help my clients do better and become more through new skills." Bingo, 10 seconds. I think everybody needs a 10-second elevator speech, then you need another one that's about 3 minutes. Because every now and then somebody's going to say, "Sounds interesting, Chris. Tell me more about what you do." And when they say, "Tell me more," give them 2.5 or 3 minutes as an overview of your uniquenesses as to what you do. But on the motivational speaker tag, I got on an airliner not too long ago, and I sat down next to this guy. We began to chat a little bit, and after a few minutes, we introduced ourselves to each other, shook hands. I said, "Don Hutson." He said, "Don Hutson." He said, "Are you that motivational speaker?" And I thought, well, here we go again with the motivational speaker title. I said to myself, "Don, don't get hung up about your title. It's not that big a deal. You don't need to have a debate with him about what your title is. Just talk to the man. You might learn something, right?" So I just said, "Yeah, that's me." Well, it seems he wanted to have a debate anyway. He said, "I thought that might have been you when I saw you get on the airliner, Don Hutson." He said, "I was in one of your audiences about 15 years ago." He said, "I was in sales then." He said, "I'm in management today, Don, and let me tell you what I've been learning." He said, "You might not like this one very much. What I've been learning is motivation is of no value because motivation doesn't last." I said, "A bath doesn't either, but it's a good idea to take one once in a while." I didn't mean to point at you on that punchline, sir. I think we got to be inspired if we're going to go to the next level. We got to be inspired to change. The problem is we got so many people in our companies who are not into change. Here's one of my favorite quotes about change. People change when the pain not to change exceeds the pain to change. Hey, if it hurts enough, we're going to say, "Wow, that's not working too well." You know, I'm not a big Dr. Phil fan, but I love his line when he's roasting somebody, you know, about why'd you do this and why'd you do that and what are you doing about it? And they give some bonehead answer, and he said, "How's that working for you?" What a great question. We need to look in the mirror every now and then and think about our own process of doing business and say, "How's that working for you?" Sometimes it's very painful to change, but if it hurts enough, we're going to say, "You know what? I'm going to do something new. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do something better." Now, I talk to a lot of sales audiences, and this speech is not about sales. It's more about entrepreneurship, and we're going to talk about building value and negotiations and so forth in my allotted time. But I want to say one thing to you about sales. Make sure your selling style in your company is one that your customers like. People say, "What's the best way to sell today?" And my answer to that is you need to sell the way your customers like to be sold. It's not about us, it's about them. One of the great things about having the opportunity to work with Ken Blanchard when we wrote The 1 Minute Entrepreneur, incidentally, there are copies on the table, one for each of you. Hope you enjoy this book. How many of you have already read the book? Some of you already got it? Okay. I love Ken Blanchard because he is totally devoid of ego. He's been a close friend of mine for 25 years. We were in Speakers Roundtable together for a number of years, and we saw the vision for writing this little book. Actually, I hate to tell you this, it took us 5 years to write this little book. Somebody said, "Boy, you guys are really slow, aren't you?" But anyway, we got it done. But one of the things I love about Ken Blanchard, for one of our bigger clients that Ken and I both work with in December, we had this big meeting down in San Antonio, by the way, and wonderful meeting. And Ken started off the keynote address for an hour, and all he talked about for an hour was the importance of humility over ego. You know what happens to us sometimes when you enjoy some of the success that you've enjoyed? Every now and then, if we're not careful, our ego kind of takes off a little bit. Yeah. I've seen it in my business. I know a lot of speakers, they think, "Well, William Jennings Bryan was number one, I'm number two." I've been flying airplanes since I was 15 years old. You'd be amazed the number of pilots I've talked to. They think Charles Lindbergh was number one, I'm number two. People get eaten up with their ego. But Ken Blanchard has a great line. He said, "Just because you've done something well, don't let your ego eat your brain." Isn't that a great line? He says, "Go talk to your customers and lead with your ears." Zig Ziglar phrases it a little differently on ego. He says, make sure you never ever contract the disease called egomania. He said, egomania is a very strange disease. It makes everybody sick except the one who's got it. Pretty good thought line. Now, when I say let's try to sell our customers the way they like to be sold, I want to submit to you that we need to try to make sure we avoid stressing people out with our sales process. I created a thesis not long ago. I think that interpersonal stress and trust are inversely proportional in business relationships. Look at the diagram. When trust is low and stress is high, and by the way, that's what happens when you try to sell somebody with pressure, like they used to do years ago. I'll never forget when Dick Gardner hired me into the training business. I was 21 years old. I was wet behind the ears but eager to learn. I hadn't been with him a couple of months. When he came into the sales meeting room one morning, we had 4 guys working the St. Louis market in those days. It's about 7 a.m. We're planning our day. Gardner walks in. He said, hey, fellas. We were all fellas back then. He said, I heard the sales and marketing executives of St. Louis is having a big sales rally in a couple of weeks. They're bringing some big deal speaker to town. And I thought we ought to go. If we're going to be in the training business, we need to practice what we preach. Here, I got us all tickets, and he handed the tickets out. And a couple of Thursday nights later, we went to the big sales rally in downtown St. Louis in a hotel ballroom, and they had a big deal speaker whose name I probably should not mention because this is not a very flattering reference. But his initials were J. Douglas Edwards. Anybody here ever hear Doug Edwards or maybe his recordings? He was charismatic. He was eloquent, but he was hard sell. Now picture this. 2,000 people in the audience. I'm sitting on the front row. They introduce the legendary J. Douglas Edwards, great sales trainer. He comes out from backstage and he walks out to the front edge of the stage and he pauses for effect. And then he utters this opening line. You got to remember in selling, those people you're talking to have got your money in their pocket. Your job is to get it without going to jail. And I'm 21 years old. I'm writing this stuff down. Some guy behind me said, man, that's good stuff, good stuff. It wasn't good stuff. It was garbage. But that was the late 60s. It was the only game in town. But what happens when you still see a Neanderthal from time to time who tries to close somebody before they've earned the right? What happens is the stress of the prospective buyer goes up and the trust comes down. People today want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And every entrepreneur knows that. We got to make sure that every one of our people also know it. Now, what happens with this undesirable model when trust is low and stress is high? We've got a lousy conversion rate of prospects to buyers. It's tougher to put new business on the books. When you got a lousy conversion rate, things aren't working. You got to work harder and you got to burn through more prospects to get anything sold. What's the other outgrowth of it? A long sales cycle. The definition of the sales cycle is the length of time which transpires from the initial presentation of a product, service, or idea until an affirmative decision is made. Long sales cycles mean low productivity for sales organizations. Short sales cycles mean high productivity. So here's what the desirable model looks like. Trust is high. Stress is low. Hey, that's a good thing. Lots of trust, not much stress. A terrific conversion rate of prospects to buyers and short sales cycles. Have you ever noticed that there's some salespeople, I hope you got some working for you, who just seem to have a magic ability to compress more achievement into a given measurable time frame than other people? They're just really, really good. And you try to figure it out and you say, well, is it IQ? It's not IQ. I think it's better to be smart than not smart, but it's not IQ. Some people say, well, I bet it's call count. Well, boy, call count's important and so is work ethic, but it's not just that either. I think the greatest salespeople working for all of us are the people who compress more achievement into a given measurable time frame. And that's a part of their personal level of motivation to make it come about and to make it happen. So I say let's do what we can to be the best we can be to motivate people for change, for progress, for growth, for the utilization of new skills. And the best definition of motivation I've ever seen. This is how we can help get our people to make things happen. Thoreau says that motivation is the pull of anticipation and the push of discipline. Oh, I love that definition. You know, we could do a half-day seminar on those two words, couldn't we? See, anticipation, those are your goals, your visions, your objectives, aren't they? And then we got the discipline, that's the work ethic, the determination, the purpose, if you will, all of which are critically important, I think you'll agree. Well, if we're going to have visions for change, growth, and progress, we got to be willing to back off, regroup, and tweak and fine-tune everything we're doing, in my estimation. Let's identify best practices. Let's do what's working. Let's eliminate what's not working. If something is not very productive, let's tweak it, let's fine-tune it, let's get it more productive. And let's keep a good attitude in the process. I've got a model I call the leadership limitation syndrome. It means that whatever your attitude is, your people's attitude is not going to really be any better than yours. Whatever your MO is about skill building, their MO about skill building is not going to be any better than yours. That's what I call the unassuming power of leadership. We're leading people when we don't even realize we're leading people by the example that we set. I say let's have a hunger for knowledge. Let's have an excitement for new ideas. Let me ask you this question. What kind of a grade do you give yourself on tapping the collective intellect of your team members? You know, Chris, you might be the smartest guy in your company. But as smart as you are, Chris, you're not as smart as everybody in your company combined. You see, that's what we call collective intellect. And there's a lot of intellect with your team members that sometimes is taken for granted. Do what you can to tap the collective intellect of your people. All right, so that sales model, we want to be motivated to have the best sales model we can have in our organization, and that's the way we make our visions become a reality. So we don't want to be involved in the product pitch anymore, that's passé, and we don't want to be involved in the hard sell because that simply doesn't work. Well, maybe we could be involved in relationship selling. You know, that showed up in about the 70s, and it has proven to be extraordinarily successful. Let's keep on building relationships. Stage 4 in the evolution of the profession of selling was needs analysis selling. Great. Jim Cathcart says, in selling like in medicine, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. Let's don't do any selling till we do some needs assessment first. And let's do a good job of that. And then Dr. George Lucas, my colleague at U.S. Learning, and I created a model a couple of years ago we call symbiotic selling. And symbiotic selling deals with the idea that we need to do all we can to try to be our best from a standpoint of creating what I call symbiotic competencies. Now, the symbiotic competencies are, for example, an example of a symbiotic relationship. How many of you, show of hands, are familiar with what a remora is? R-E-M-O-R-A. I think your hand was up first back here, sir. What's a remora? Exactly. A remora has at the top of its dorsal fin a suction device. And remoras attach themselves to the bellies of sharks. Now, sharks love remoras. How many of you do not think of a shark as a warm and loving creature? You know, I don't either. They're really kind of ominous looking, aren't they? Got that big fin going. Look at those teeth right there. Man, that's kind of... But sharks love remoras, because that remora attaches itself to the belly of the shark and it moves around very slowly, consuming the residue on the shark's belly. Now, the shark loves the program because he's getting the slick belly out of the deal, which enables him to swim with greater efficiency in seeking his prey. The remora loves the relationship because he's getting a happy meal out of the deal. It's a symbiotic relationship. A shark would never consume a remora. Symbiotic relationship. I got a question for you. Do you have some customers who are so loyal to you and who have demonstrated such allegiance to you and your company that they not only won't give your competitor an order, they won't even give them an appointment? You got some customers like that? Congratulations. You have created a symbiotic relationship. Don't ever take it for granted. Just think about what we can do to make it better all the time. Visions for growth and progress to grow the sales organization to make it bigger and better and more successful than ever before. Well, successful entrepreneurs do something else. They are intensely customer focused. So this is my number 2 subtopic for the morning. We not only have to have visions for change and progress, but we got to make sure we are intensely customer focused. That's where organizational growth comes from. I'm a big fan and a student of Dr. Peter Drucker. He's been dead for years, but I continue to read his books. One of the greatest management consultants and philosophers who ever lived. My favorite Peter Drucker line is his simple definition of the purpose of a business. Drucker said the purpose of a business is to attract and retain customers. Now, attracting, hey, that's sales and marketing. Retaining, that's customer service. Do you know it's 6 times more expensive to get a new customer as it is to keep an existing one? 6 times. When's the last time you stopped to think about the power of vertical prospecting within your customer base? How many of you are selling multi-lines of whatever you're selling? You don't just have one product, but you got multiple products. Show of hands. Most of you? Okay. What kind of grade do you give yourself on selling your full line through the vertical prospecting concepts of doing more business with your existing customers? You've already got the relationship. Let's think about what we can do to provide more for them in that process, and then let's give them great service, and all of a sudden they become indifferent toward our competition. And I think one of the things we need to do is try to build all the loyalty we can build. And I've got a model that I call the loyalty ladder, and it deals with the idea that if we go out there and do the best job we can of understanding our customers and ask them about their needs. In fact, I believe so strongly in it that I think we should never ever begin a sales presentation until we ask needs analysis questions first. Because when we give our customer the opportunity to talk, that's when we learn the most. Ken said, lead with your ears, right? At U.S. Learning, we have a client that's in the relocation business, great company, but they were suffering a very poor closure rate. Their conversion rate of prospects to buyers on what they call their best and final presentation, they sold to big companies who were moving a lot of people. Well, their closure rate was under 5%. So they're putting all this energy into giving this best and final presentation, and they fly 4 or 5 people to Chicago or Los Angeles to give this presentation, and they're closing only 5%. Now, every time they close somebody, the good news is they might do $30 million a year with one client. So it's a big deal when they get a new customer. But they were really suffering a terrible conversion rate. So they called in the professionals at U.S. Learning, right? So Dr. Lucas and I go in, and we look at everything they're doing. And after a couple of months of all our research and doing a few seminars, we had a startling realization, because we believe in needs analysis. We believe in discovery. We believe in talking to people about what their needs are, where they're psychologically and behaviorally coming from. And if you don't do that, you're short-circuiting the sales and marketing and customer service process. So here's our recommendation we gave them, and they freaked out. We said our recommendation is that you never, ever agree to do a best and final presentation for any company who will not first give you a 1/2-day in-person discovery meeting with all the key decision makers. They freaked out. They said, we can't demand that. These companies are not going to do that. And I said, well, is anybody else asking for it? And they said, no, we've never heard of that before. I said, well, hey, there's something novel about a new idea. Let's give it a try. And let's just tell them, the only circumstances under which we will come to your city and give a best and final presentation to your decision-making team is it must be preceded by a discovery meeting first. And we'd like to come in. We're going to come in at our expense. We'd like to have a 1/2 day to brainstorm with your decision makers. We want to find out what's most important to you. We want to find out where the pain is in your current relocation process. And if you'll give us this opportunity, we can tailor a solution for you, which would be impossible to do without the discovery meeting. Do you know, when they expressed it like that, they started getting all these discovery meetings. Competition's not doing it. They gained a tremendous competitive edge. And it took us 18 months, so I'm not trying to say we brought in some kind of magic bullet, but after 18 months, their conversion rate went from 4.6% to 31.5% on best and final presentations. And it was all about discovery. I like to call it the authorship principle. I don't think you'll find that word in the dictionary. Maybe I invented it, I don't know. But authorship is when you give another person the respectful right to be heard. Their opportunity to influence outcomes will greatly enhance their buy-in and eagerness to gain the desired results. So we give them an opportunity for authorship. Mr. Prospect, I'm excited about telling you what our company does, but before I get into any of that, I'd love to know a little bit more about your company. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions? And they always say yes to that. And you use the right and positive demeanor in doing it. And you show concern, and you ask really, really good questions. And you give them some of that nonverbal communication that works so well, and when you nod positively, it encourages their verbalization. And when you look at them in a questioning manner, sometimes it decreases their verbalization. But let's do everything we can to keep a positive interaction going. And don't be afraid to use some of those basic old Dale Carnegie skills. You know, a nice, pleasant smile is a nice message, isn't it? The problem is sometimes we're smiling on the inside, we forget to smile on the outside. Not long ago, I'll give you a good example of that when I was sitting in my own den, listening to some of my favorite music, reading a good book. My son Kevin came in. He said, "Dad, how are you doing?" I said, "Kevin, I'm doing great." He said, "Well, why don't you notify your face?" Sometimes we're smiling on the inside, we forget to smile on the outside. You guys are a great audience for early on a Saturday morning. I appreciate that. In fact, I could have used y'all when I spoke in the South Bronx one time. Anybody here ever been to the South Bronx? They say if you ever want a friend in the South Bronx, you better take one with you when you go. It's a tough place. I read the other day where 2 men got mugged while robbing a liquor store in the South Bronx. You know, that's pretty tough, isn't it? Okay. So back to authorship. Let's do what we can to give them opportunities for authorship, and in the process we build trust and we gain loyalty. Now, what does this loyalty ladder look like? Well, the loyalty ladder is a process by which we move people up that loyalty ladder over a period of time by building trust and doing a great job and communicating effectively with them. You see, when it comes to communications, I believe it's okay to over-communicate. It's just not okay to under-communicate, because when you under-communicate, communications does not take place. Through effective communication, staying in touch, doing the best job we can, all of a sudden we start to build more and more loyalty. We start off down here with the group we call suspects. Now, what are suspects? Suspects are people who maybe they've heard of your company, maybe they haven't, but you've never done any business with them. In the geographic area in which you specialize, there are lots and lots of companies that could be buying from you who aren't. Am I right about that? Almost the case with every business. So our goal is, through a good sales and marketing process, hopefully some proactive selling and some good marketing, we want to be able to make some contacts, turn those suspects into prospects, don't we? Hopefully qualified prospects who have the money and they have a need or desire to buy from you. Now, our goal then, once we get some really good prospects, we want to get the order, right? So we do our due diligence, we do our discovery, we give them the opportunity for authorship, we learn more about them before we ever ask for the order. It's called never ever trying to gain a commitment until we have earned the right to do so. And we earn the right through the discovery process. So we want to turn prospects into customers, don't we? Third rung on the loyalty ladder. What's a customer anyway? One definition is somebody who's bought from you at least one time. Well, I could go to the sundry shop at the airport at DFW this afternoon and buy a newspaper and be the customer. I'll never see that clerk again the rest of my life, more than likely. But I spent money there, I'm a customer. Am I safe in assuming you're looking for more meaningful relationships than that in your marketplace? You are, aren't you? Let's take good care of our customers. Let's try to move them to the next level, and let's try to make some clients out of them. Now, what's the difference between a customer and a client? Well, Chris, if I've been doing business with you for 3 years and I'm your customer, and there's repeat business there, and I continue to buy from you, it means we got something going in this business relationship. So I feel pretty good about it, but all of a sudden I realize over time that Chris has really brought a lot to the table. I realize when I see him pull up in front of our office building, I look out there and he gets out of the car and he's coming in, and I have nice warm thoughts because I'm thinking, Chris has got answers to my questions, he's got solutions to my problems. I feel good about that. I need the help. So I feel good about Chris as a human being, and we are developing a business relationship which is becoming advanced. Now here's when we have earned the right to call somebody a client. When they have presumed and indicated that we are a valuable resource to them. The key word is resource. When we're a resource to them, we've earned the right to call them a client. Well, after about 5 years, Chris, by golly, I'm your client now, and I feel good about that. Well, we've been doing business for 8 years now, Chris. Have you noticed time flying this morning? 8 years now, Chris, and I have become your advocate. It's more than just a simple business relationship. You know, there's no law that says you can't make your customers your friends. Chris and I have become friends. We've logged a little time on a golf cart together. We've been hunting or fishing together. We've enjoyed some personal time, and he's become a meaningful friend of mine. An advocate is someone who, unsolicited, will give you a referral for additional business, and you don't even have to ask. Now, by that definition, how many of you have some advocates in your marketplace? Wonderful. Nurture your advocates. What could possibly be better than an advocate? One more rung on the loyalty ladder, and I call them confidants. Now, what are confidants? Confidants are people who used to be advocates. Chris, we've been doing business for 12 years now. And not only have we become really good friends, but you've been in my home and I've been in your home, and we even know each other's spouses' names, kids' names. Chris, you even know my dog's name. You reach a point where you know their dog's name, man, you're in there, right? Close personal friendship. We just happen to be doing some business together. And if on that golf cart Chris shares with me or I share with him a confidentiality, we can do so with the full knowledge that it's never going beyond the two of us. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can have 15 confidants. I don't think you've got enough room in your heart, in your caring spirit, or enough time on your Franklin Day Planner to have 15 confidants, but very selectively, maybe 2 or 3. Now, a little earlier, I made reference to the concept of time compression, where the people who are doing the best job of business development, the entrepreneurs who look at their numbers and their revenues are soaring, are the people who have a sales organization where there's this meaningful trust that's being built and taking place. And they look at their top salespeople, they say, why, how's old Charlie pulling that off? Man, Karen is unbelievable. How's it happening? And you observe their behavior and you notice they're compressing lots of achievement into a given measurable time frame. And here's where I make the major point, the major takeaway. The high performers who are compressing more achievement into a given measurable time frame spend most of their time in relationships on the top 3 rungs of the loyalty ladder. The ROI of time and energy invested up here is huge. While the average and below average salespeople in the organization are spending a large amount of time down here where the ROI is much, much smaller, where the stress is greater and it's not nearly as much fun. Because you see what's going on up here is up here we're creating customers for life. Where down here we're involved in what's called hard labor. Not nearly as much fun. Now it's necessary to initiate this process to move them up the ladder. So that's what I contend we need to be doing, and one of the best ways that we can move people up that loyalty ladder is let's blow them away with the greatest service they've ever seen in their lives. How much great service do we need to render? Answer: considerably more than our competition is rendering. That's who we're endlessly being compared to in the marketplace. I think we need to periodically perform some customer service miracles. That tends to gain a nice bump in trust and allegiance. How many of you have ever performed a miracle for a customer? Let me see your hands. I'll bet you have at one time or another. May I give you an example of one? Say yes. Okay. Keith Bennett is a guy in Memphis who, when I travel on the airliner, for years I've parked my car at his facility. And he's got a great leadership style, he's got a great sales culture, great customer service culture. And Keith is a terrific guy. I enjoy doing business with him. Well, a while back I pulled in to park my car, and I got on their van, they loaded my bags, took me to the terminal, and I left on about a 10-day trip. 2 days later, my wife pulled in to park her car. She gets out of her car, gets on the van. They load her bags, take her to the terminal. She's going to meet me in Toronto for a little long weekend getaway vacation. What she didn't realize was when she got out of her car, she left her wallet on the right front seat. Well, she didn't miss it. She's got her purse. She's on the way to the terminal now. They're taking her over there. And a bit later, the guy gets in her car to put it in the parking place, and he sees the wallet, takes it inside, gives it to the manager, Keith Bennett. Keith Bennett looks through the wallet, sees the name Hutson, and calls my office. Well, I'm gone. He talks to my assistant, Linda Hightower. He said, Linda, this is Keith Bennett calling from the parking facility at the airport where the Hutsons park. Miss Hutson just parked with us. We've already taken her to the terminal. She left her wallet in her car. I've got it right here. I'd love to try to get it back to her. Do you have any idea what flight she's going out on? Linda said, Keith, I'm sorry, I don't book her flights. He said, well, what travel agency do you normally use? She said, International Tours. Who do you deal with over there? Well, her name is Sarah. Do you know the phone number offhand? Sure, she said. I call it all the time. It's 345-1680. Well, Keith Bennett is writing all this down. He said, that's all I need for now. I'll call you back. Now he's on the phone calling Sarah at the travel agency. Gets her on the phone. Sarah, this is Keith Bennett calling. I manage the parking facility near the airport where the Hutsons park. Miss Hutson just parked with us. We've already taken her to the terminal. She left her wallet in her car. I'd love to try to get it back to her. Do you have any idea what flight she's going out on? She said, sure. She just picked her ticket up 30 minutes ago. Hang on a second. Let me punch it into the computer. And she did, and then she said, here we go. It's Northwest Flight 268, leaves at 12:32 p.m. It's a nonstop to Detroit with a connection to Toronto. He's writing it down. He said, that's all I need for now. Sarah, thank you. I'll call you back. He hangs up the phone, jumps up from the desk, runs out into the parking lot, jumps in the first available automobile, speeds over to the terminal, parks upper level curbside. What's a little risk for a really good customer, right? Turns on his flashing lights, gets out, locks the door, runs inside, checks that front door monitor, looking for Northwest 268. There it is, Northwest 268, leaving on time, 12:32 p.m. out of gate B26. He looks at his watch and thinks, maybe I can make it. He gets through security and takes off running. This is just slightly before 9/11. How many of you remember the good old days of easy security? Whole different world, wasn't it? Well, now he is sprinting down that concourse to B26. He gets there and he sells his way by the gate agent, runs down the jetway to the door of the aircraft, sells his way by the flight attendant, right down the center aisle of that aircraft, now looking for my wife, and he spots her over there. And he runs over to her, panting from his sprint. He said, Miss Hutson, here's your wallet. You have a great trip. And he gave it to her, and he turned, and he was out of there. Didn't even wait for a tip. Question. How long do you think I'm going to do business with Keith Bennett? One word answer starts with the letter F. I bet we all know. Why don't we say the word aloud together now? The answer is forever. Forever. I don't even have the wife anymore, and I'm still parking with Keith Bennett. Boy, it took me a long time to be able to laugh about that line, but hey, some relationships are forever and some aren't, right? Keith Bennett is a forever program. We're confidants. Got some terrible news. Keith was transferred to Tulsa. So I periodically fly into Tulsa and rent a car just so I can go park with him. Not really, but we do stay in touch. What can we do to create allegiance? I think performing customer service miracles is really not magic. We only need two things. You need a good heart because you got to want to. You've got to want to perform that kind of service. And the second thing you need is a keen eye to be able to spot the miracle opportunity. Train your people to look for miracle opportunities with everybody from right here up on this grid. Look for miracle opportunities. That's how we build the trust, move them up the loyalty ladder, earn their allegiance. What's a miracle? Anything that'll make that customer say, wow. Because they don't say wow at home in front of the mirror. They say wow out in the marketplace, telling people how great you are. And that's where it gets fun. So let's do what we can to be intensely customer focused. Let's be the kind of entrepreneurs that know that our business comes from those people out there who are cutting the checks to do business with us. Let's make sure we are focused on the customer. And let's remember that we can never ever let our guard down and be indifferent toward a customer. You know, you'd think the airlines would get it, wouldn't you? What's their problem? They don't get it. Have y'all heard about Delta's new slogan in their Atlanta hub? Yeah. We're not happy till you're not happy. And I hear it's working for them. Weird. Okay, let's move to the next idea. Great entrepreneurs in today's marketplace are skilled negotiators. Show of hands, how many of you have ever read a book on negotiations? Okay, maybe 30%. How many of you have ever been to a negotiation seminar? Great, that's higher percentages than usual. How many of you love to negotiate? Wow, you guys are racehorses. I love it. These are higher percentages than I ever get. How many of you would agree that most people don't like to negotiate? One of the worst examples, buying cars. Isn't it a pain to have to go buy a car and you think, okay, I got this confrontation coming up and this good guy, bad guy with this bonehead salesman who's got to go check with his manager on everything. Nobody likes to buy cars. You know why? Because those car dealers, 95% of them think I'm never going to see these people again anyway. I'm going to beat them up and get every nickel I can get. Most people hate to negotiate. In fact, most people, even people who say they like it, all of us probably have at least a little bit of a disease that prior to this morning you probably didn't even know you might have had a little bit of. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm going to tell you about the disease, and most of us have it. It's called negotiophobia. And in business today, we can ill afford to have negotiophobia. The good news is there's a solution to it, to how we deal with it. Well, first of all, what is negotiophobia? Negotiophobia is a fear of negotiating based on limited experience, discomfort with uncertainty, and a lack of skill. Anytime we go into a negotiation with reluctance or without preparation, we're going to probably have a little negotiophobia come into play. And by the way, what is a negotiation anyway? A negotiation is the often ongoing process through which two or more parties whose positions are not consistent work in an effort to reach an agreement. That's a negotiation. Now, an upfront agreement is not the same thing as a negotiation. An upfront agreement is, Chris, you got a used car you want to sell, and you advertise it for $10,000. And I go look at it, and I think, I believe it's okay. $10,000, I'll take it. That's an upfront agreement. Now, be careful of the perils of upfront agreements. One of the perils is a little bit of negotiator's remorse. Because of the fact that you did not negotiate, the upfront agreement superseded any negotiation. So I'm driving away, and Chris said, boy, that was painless. I bet I could have gotten 12 out of that guy. I'm driving away, well, I got a little bit of remorse too. You know what? Should have offered him 8. Who knows? He might have taken it. Most of the time, we end up in a negotiation. Now, let me give you a couple of models and a little history on this. We've got the 1-minute negotiator coming out in August, which we're really excited about. And it's based on the idea that there are 4 negotiation styles. And it is incumbent upon us to know all 4 and be competent in terms of the 4 skill sets of how to do each. And this is a new concept. It's a new twist for negotiation training because most people have one method. If they teach negotiations at all, they teach one method. And most of it is competitive, hardline negotiation. The pie is finite in size. Every dollar you get, you're taking away from them. And, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And you've heard about the hardline approach, right? Sometimes there's a place for competitive negotiations. Then there's another style called collaboration, and that's what the Harvard Business School teaches in their negotiation practices classes. It's always win-win. Try to create a win-win, lasting relationship. You know what? I like collaboration. I like win-win. That's where I like to go if they're going with me. Let me show you our grid. This is cool. It's based on the idea that there are 2 axes on the grid. The vertical axis is what we call activation, and the horizontal axis is what we call cooperation. And the net effect of that is you've got 4 negotiation styles. So take a look at the screen. We've got proactive at the top and reactive at the bottom. So that vertical line is the activation line. Then the horizontal line is the cooperation line with low cooperation over here, high cooperation over on the right. The net effect of that is there are 4 types of strategies in negotiating. One is avoidance. I was going to put off talking about it, but I guess I've got to go ahead and tell you about it. Avoidance, these are the people who've got the most severe case of negotiophobia. They just don't want to go there. They see it as unpleasant. They don't feel comfortable in the negotiations arena. They don't have the skill sets to carry them through it successfully, and they avoid at all costs. Look where they are on the axes. They are reactive and they are low cooperation. So they're kind of hanging back. Avoidance. Accommodation, lower right, these are people who are reactive but highly cooperative. That means that they're going to be of a spirit to give something up. They're accommodating. Now, if you're going to accommodate, I say go there reservedly, go there with full knowledge, and get something in return if and when you do accommodate. All right, look at upper left. This is the competition. This is what most negotiation trainers teach. Here's how you get every dollar you can get. But you see, that's really not a relationship building sort of thing, is it? But competition is low cooperation but proactive. They're going to try to beat you up if they can for every dollar of your margin they can steal. And then we've got collaboration upper right. That's the desire, I think, in a perfect world. If we want to move people up that loyalty ladder, and we want to do everything in our power to try to be the best we can be, and try to collaborate and gain great allegiance from our customer base, that's very noble if we can pull it off. But when you go toward collaboration, make sure they're coming with you. Because if you're collaborating and they're competing, you're going to have a tendency to give some things up. And that's what we call de facto accommodation. We've got to know what we're doing in this negotiations arena. You know, the great J. Paul Getty, the billionaire, was one of the best negotiators in global business history. Somebody asked him one time, Mr. Getty, what have we got to do to be as successful as possible in our lives? He said, well, success is really very simple. You've only got to do 3 things. He said, rise early, work hard, strike oil. You know, that's a pretty good formula, isn't it? Now, some of you EOers out there are saying right now, well, Don, that's fine and good, but I'm not in the oil business. No, but you know what? We've all got some potential oil patches out there where we can, in effect, strike our own oil by being really, really good at something that matters, and I think negotiation fits into that category. So let's be adaptable enough, and let me give you my definition of adaptability. Let's be adaptable enough that we can go to where we need to be on this negotiations matrix right here. Now, what is behavioral adaptability? Well, if we're me-oriented, these are people who are preoccupied with their own agenda. And maybe this is somebody who's going to be a competitive negotiator. They got their blinders on and they're not going to move around much. They're tough. But if they're tough and if you got a lot on the line and trying to negotiate with them, go to competition with them and let them see your strength in your own competitive process. And when you do that so often, they'll lighten up and say, you know, maybe it's time for us to collaborate if they really want to do business with you. Let's be adaptable. Let's be able to go to where they are. We've also got high adaptability people, and these are you-oriented. These are people who are sincerely looking for a relationship advancement process. And if people want to accommodate, they want to compete, they want to collaborate, we've got the skill through our adaptability and our knowledge of the 4 styles of negotiating to go to where we need to be, to cover ourselves and protect ourselves. Now, the cool thing is, the 1-minute negotiator is indeed the 1-minute format, like our 1-minute entrepreneur and 1-minute manager you probably read many years ago. The 1-minute negotiator, we had a little bit of trouble, but we got it done trying to make it simple. We came up with what we call the EASY process for negotiation. EASY is an acronym, E-A-S-Y. E is for engage. When you see that you're apparently going to get involved with somebody in what could be a negotiation, you engage. And in the engagement process, you take a close look at where you are and where they are, and is this going to be a negotiation? And if it is, we need to give some careful thought to the 4 styles and where we're going to probably be going here. So that is the engage. A in the EASY formula. A is to assess. Assess your tendencies for your negotiation preferable style and assess their tendencies. Now remember, the best predictor of human behavior, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, right? So if you've had any dealings with them at all, what they've done in the past, they're probably going to do today. So that's a pretty good indicator. If it's a brand new relationship, watch carefully and closely and try to observe what their tendencies might be, but also know your own. By the way, I've got a little freebie for you. We've got a little assessment. It's only 20 questions. And I'll be glad to email a copy of this assessment to you. In about 5 minutes, you can run through it and categorize your tendencies by a numerical order of competition, collaboration, accommodation, or avoidance by your own self-assessment. You'll find that interesting, and I'll be glad to email that to you if you give me your card or email address. Okay. E, engage. A, assess. S, strategize. Now, you've considered the matrix and whether you're in a negotiation. You've assessed your tendencies and the predictable tendency of the other person. It's now time to strategize. Where are you going to go on this matrix? Are you going to collaborate, compete, avoid, or accommodate? Let's watch where they're going. Let's see what works best for us. But now we have 4 skill sets for negotiations. The why. This is your 1-minute drill. Why for your drill. Every time you think you might get into a possible negotiation, just think, your drill. You can do it in a minute. EASY. And that's the process. Now, the cool thing about the EASY formula is it does 2 things. Number 1, it helps you in the negotiation process. And number 2, it is a simultaneous cure or improvement of your negotiophobia situation, if indeed you got a little bit of that going on. So I like to collaborate. That's my preference. If somebody calls me on the phone, they want to do business with U.S. Learning or have me do some training for their company, I welcome the call and I have a spirit of collaboration. If they want to beat me up on my fee or we get into a price situation, I can compete. Yeah, I'm a nice guy, but you back me into a corner, I can be tough. My wife was in a horrible automobile accident 6 years ago, almost died. There was another person who it was a car wreck, and he was hurt pretty badly, and he chose to sue us for $3 million. Previously friends of ours, by the way, coincidentally. So they filed this lawsuit against us. Now, he was hurt, but not $3 million worth of hurt. He was inconvenienced more than severely hurt. So we begin the lawsuit process. You know how all that works. And I don't want to dwell on a negative here, but we're talking about some pretty important skill sets and core competencies if we're going to run a profitable business. So we begin the negotiations process. And obviously we want to try to avoid a trial if we can. So it reached a point where we were in mediation. So it's now me and my wife and a couple of our attorneys and the mediator, who's also an attorney, in one conference room. Down the hall in the other conference room, it's him and his wife and their attorneys, and the mediator's going back and forth, right? So we get there. It's to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. So we show up. I've always heard negotiations try to get them to put the first number on the table. Actually, it's a pretty good rule. So I said to the mediator, so to settle this thing, what kind of money do they want? What do they got to have? He said, well, I'll ask them what their opening position is. He goes down the hall. He comes back about 15 minutes later. He said, the number is $4 million. I said, wait a minute. They're suing us for $3 million and they want to settle for $4 million? Did they think I just fell off a watermelon truck? What's going on here? So I stood up and I put all my papers into my briefcase, and I grabbed my coat and I walked out the door. And my attorney said, Don, where are you going? I didn't even answer him. I just walked out the door. I'm going to the elevator. They want to compete. Hey, I'll compete. I'm at the elevator. I'm sending a message. If he's going to be an idiot with something like that, I'm not even going to talk to him. I just said to the mediator when he followed me out the door, I just said, tell him we'll see him in court. I got a good lawyer I got a lot of confidence in. He said, Don, wait a minute. We're just starting this process. My attorney then came out. The mediator went back in. So my attorney and I are talking. He said, Don, let's get back into the process here and let's see what we can do. I said, well, we're not going back in the room anytime soon. And I hung at the elevator for about 20 minutes. And then I went back in the room with my attorney. The mediator then went down the hall. He said, he went ballistic. He was leaving. He's at the elevator. We got to get reasonable about this. Now, my message to them down the hall was, you want to compete? I'll compete. You want to go to court? I'll go to court. We'll do what we got to do. So yeah, I love to collaborate. I'm a nice guy. But you back me into a corner, I'm like most of you. Human beings go into the fight or flight mode just like a common animal goes into the fight or flight mode. We've got to have the competencies to go to where we need to be in terms of our negotiation skills to keep ourselves out of trouble and to protect our margin as best we possibly can. So let's try to be the best negotiator we can. Let's learn the skills. Let's expand the core competency. Lawsuit worked out okay. We didn't go to court. We settled for a reasonable number. Okay, next topic, moving on. It's a serious topic. Just, my responsibility to you is try to say things that will be memorable for you. So I don't like to go back into that part of my memory bank, but there's a lesson there. And the lesson, of course, is we need to be able to have multiple negotiation skills if we're going to get out there and make some great things happen. All right, let's move to my final subtopic of my program today for entrepreneurial excellence, and that is we've got to make sure we're always fine-tuning our value proposition. I'm going to give you one of the best ideas of this talk right now. If you never forget it, this will pay for your entire enrollment for your EO Roundup right here, right now. One simple idea, and it has to do with the topic of value. I want to tell you the single most important thing about value, because in your value proposition, you have different value points. of all the hundreds of companies we got represented here today, I bet every one of you could come up with a different, compelling reason why you offer great value in the deliverables of your company. But here's the one most important thing I'm going to tell you about value, and you're going to get so excited about it, some of you are just going to jump out of your chair. This is such good stuff. You look like you're going to need to find a little new energy, Doug, to do this, but you might do it. How many of you are really excited about hearing this one new idea that's going to really be valuable to you? If you're excited, say yes. Okay, here's the one thing I want you to remember about value, and if you never forget it, you'll be more successful. And the idea is, understand first and foremost what your customer values. What is their definition of value? What is their take on the deliverables of your company and where the value lies? You know, my biggest client is a $4 billion company. I've been doing a lot of work for them for a period of almost 3 years now. Up there in the ivory tower at their headquarters, you don't see too many of those VPs and senior VPs ever talking to customers. Now, they might get down as far as the dealer level, but they don't ever talk to the end users of their products. Drives me nuts. I'm telling them, figure out a way to find out what these people are thinking and where they're coming from and how they're making their decisions in your product line. We don't talk to our customers, we're in serious trouble. Talk to your customers, communicate. Communications is so critical. And again, it's okay to over-communicate, it's just not okay to under-communicate. If we're going to negotiate, build value, have a good selling situation, nice value proposition, it's all based on a foundation of excellent communications. Have you ever thought about, in communications, why it is that grandparents and grandchildren communicate so well? You ever thought about that? Never any stress there. Grandparents and grandchildren communicate beautifully together. Why do you think they communicate so well? Because they share a common enemy. So if we're going to communicate and communicate well, let's find out what our customers value. You know, you used to hear the old line, find out what's keeping them up at night. Well, that's not a bad idea either. Let's find out what's going on inside their heads. Then we can craft our value proposition around a deliverable that solves their problem. That's when we gain market share, gain allegiance, build trust, and make some great things happen in growing the top line of our business. So if we're going to be the best we can be, I've got a question I want to ask you about this value proposition. How many of you are selling a commodity? All right, I'm seeing maybe less than a dozen hands. What is a commodity anyway? Products or services without discernible differences one from another, which are available from multiple sources. Now, if you're selling a commodity, most people think, well, if you're selling a commodity, the only thing that matters in the sales process is price. Most people think, and I'm sure there are many exceptions to the rule in this astute audience today, but most people think there are two types of differentiation, product and price. Our U.S. learning model gives you 7 types of differentiation. We've got to figure out how we are different from and better than the competition, especially in the eyes of our customers, clients, advocates, and confidants. So, let's take a look at what we got to do to be good differentiators. This is a little model from the Harvard Business Review. I like this illustration. It's based on the idea that we have pricing across the bottom with market pricing here, premium pricing here, and on the left axis we've got the undifferentiated position, the competitive position, and the differentiated position. Now, these two dynamics right here enable us to move forward up into this area from extract commodities to making goods to delivering services to staging experiences. Anybody here read the book, The Experience Economy by Pine and Gilmore? Great book. But it's all about the idea, we got to perform some of those miracles and we got to do what we can to make some cool things happen. We got to differentiate. We got to be doing things better than our competitors are doing them. So let's look at the differentiation model and what we've got to do to try to go to the next level in being the best we can. And I want to give you our model of 7 types of differentiation. And the first, of course, is product. What can you do about your deliverable to make it more exciting, to make it different from what the competition's got, to be the best you can be in your process of going to market? Product differentiation, always be working on it. Then we've got experiential differentiation, and that, of course, is the service model, the performing of miracles, the identification of the wants and needs and the value points of your customer, and then staging some incredible experiences for them and performing the periodic miracle. Then, of course, we've got relationship differentiation. Relationship differentiation. I want to give you a great quote. My buddy, Dr. Tony Alessandra, we've co-authored a couple of books together. He wrote a book entitled Non-Manipulative Selling. And he says in that book, best line in the whole book, he says, if two people want to do business together, the details are probably not going to get in the way. But, he says, if either one of the two does not want to do business with the other, the details are not going to make it happen. That is the power of the relationship. So always be thinking relationship advancement. Next, we have what we call process differentiation. This is how you do what you do. The process. Always be tweaking and fine-tuning all of your processes, the big ones, the little ones, all of them. Tap the collective intellect of your team members in the process of tweaking those processes. Then we have technological differentiation. How is your product or service technologically more sophisticated than the competition's? How is your communications flow with the marketplace more technologically advanced? By the way, have you done any studying of the generations? Pretty compelling content. We don't sell everybody the same way. We don't negotiate with everybody the same way because people are coming from different places, right? You know, you've got the civics who are the patriotic types. You've got the baby boomers. Most or a lot of us in this room are baby boomers. Then we've got, of course, the Gen X. And you got Gen Y. And you don't communicate with everybody the same way. I think we need to ask our customers and prospects, how do you prefer for me to communicate with you? Some of them are going to say, well, you know, I like the in-person interaction, so stop by once a month or something. Some of them are going to say, you know, email's fine. And you get down into the Gen X, if you're talking to a decision influencer who's 28 years old, and you say, how do you prefer that we communicate? And they're probably going to say, just tweet me, text me. And all I'm saying here is, let's have the technological adaptability to be able to go wherever we need to go to communicate with people the way they want to be communicated with. So it might be technology and product, maybe in our communication system, maybe in our delivery system, but let's be techno-savvy. Then we've got marketing differentiation. And of course, the last one is price differentiation. Now, if all six are the same except for marketing, marketing, of course, is the umbrella under which you have sales, public relations, and advertising. Essentially, most things come under those three in marketing. But if in the sales and marketing process, you are better than your competition, you're going to probably gain market share and enjoy some great success. Everything else being the same, if you can outsell them, you're on your way. And that's the reason I think sales training is so important, which will not come as a big surprise to you that is my mindset. Makes me think of my friend Jim Kleeman. Jim Kleeman's a speaker in Chicago, and we both had a program we did together for about 400 leaders not long ago. And Jim's up there, and I knew one of the things he was going to say because he always says it. He said, if I could only say one thing to you folks today that'll help you get a bigger book of business and enjoy greater success and enhance profits, he said, I can say it in one word. He said the word is training. Training, training. You could hear the strain in his voice. Well, there was a guy who chose that moment to interrupt Jim Kleeman. He said, hey, Jim. He's about 6 rows back in the audience. He said, hey, Jim, what if I spend a bunch of time and money training my people and they leave? Jim Kleeman walked down from the stage, walked right up to that man. He said, well, what if you don't and they stay? I don't see any way I can make it. You're gracious to invite me. Let me get you one of my Speakers Roundtable fellow members for this year's meeting and book me for next year's meeting. He said, Don, let's don't give up so easily. I said, oh? He said, didn't you say in your talk the other night, Don, that your wife was into horses? I said, man, you got a great memory. Yeah, she's into horses. I used to use a few lines about that. Years ago, my wife and my secretary got into the Tennessee walking horse business. It was for me about like supporting a heroin habit. He remembered that line. I said, yes, she's into horses. He said, Don, would it intrigue you at all to learn that we're going to have our meeting this year at the 5,000-acre horse farm of our chairman of the board? I said, 5,000-acre horse farm? You got to be kidding me. That sounds incredible. He said, my friend, incredible is a perfect choice of words. The place is incredible. You got to see it to believe it. What is this guy doing to me? This guy's building my perception of value, right? And he's good. But I was pleasantly persistent. I said, I know it must be a lovely layout, but I'll be frank with you, that's a really tough weekend. I don't see any way I can make it. He said, well, Don, let me ask you a question. See, he had heard me speak at the jockey thing, and I used a couple of my aviation stories and how I've been interested in aviation for many years. He said, Don, let me ask you this. He said, would you ask your wife something for me? I said, well, sure. He said, I just want to know, I want to ask you, you ask your wife, have you ever experienced a cool, crisp, early autumn Saturday morning in central Kentucky? He said, how about if we just do this? How about if at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, you and your wife and your kids be at Memphis International Airport at 10 a.m.? We'll just send our company Learjet down to pick you up. He said, now will you ask your wife something? I said, anything. What? He said, I just want to know if you've ever experienced a cool, crisp, early autumn Saturday morning in central Kentucky where you get in a Jet Ranger helicopter. I said, now wait a minute, are we talking Learjet or helicopter? He said, it's both, Don, just listen. He said, I'm going to have a talk with our helicopter pilot here. We're going to make this all come together. He said, you get in a helicopter, and he said, you climb out a couple hundred feet, and maybe you see a little fog and a few clouds, but you climb on out about 800 feet, and the fog dissipates, and the clouds part, and you see a little blue sky and sunshine above. Then, Don, you look down, and that's when you see those rolling bluegrass hills of central Kentucky. You look more closely, you begin to see those white partitioning fences and those prancing racehorses in their morning run. He said, Don, have you ever seen that from 800 feet in a Jet Ranger helicopter? I said, not lately, brother, I haven't. He said, it is a sight to behold. He said, now, Don, it's only a 15-minute helicopter flight to the ranch. We're going to get you off the helicopter over to the meeting site and let you give your speech, and if you're so inclined, stick around for the social hour. And then whenever you're ready, we're going to put you and your wife and your kids back on the Jet Ranger helicopter, back to the Lexington airport, back on the Learjet. We're going to have you back in Memphis at 3 o'clock that afternoon. I said, man, let's book the program. Forget the fee. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. You guys have been great. Wonderful being with you today. Thank you very much.
Hey, a little less conversation.